Right then, looks like we're on air. Welcome everyone to this friendly chat with the Bronx blogger about probably Antifa, Kyrgyzstan, that kind of thing. As with all serious things, it began on Twitter, and you can see the link to the original discussion in the description. And you can also see a link to the Bronx blogger's Twitter in the description. So why don't you introduce yourself?
I am the Bronx blogger. I originally was a left-wing anarchist blogger during the early Obama presidency, and then later, about a year ago, I transitioned into doing political speech on YouTube.
Okay. So let me start with a quick question here.
Sure.
So your Twitter bio starts with ultra left. So on a scale of 1 to 60 million, what did Stalin do wrong?
Well, Stalin. Okay, when you have a discussion with someone,
that was a joke. I'm not trying to start a discussion about Stalin specifically.
Okay, because Slavoj Žižek would go on for days about how he wasn't that bad, but I completely forgot Stalin. Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch from one left-wing power figure to some others.
Sure.
What do you think about punching Nazis in the face when they're peacefully engaging in an interview?
Okay, and I've done a few videos on it. Here's my concern as someone who is involved with my local chapter of Antifa in New York. Richard Spencer, and I did a video showcasing some footage of this. Have you watched the Richard Spencer discourse that he gave at University of A&M?
Maybe, but I can't remember specifically by name.
Okay, I'm just going to give you an example before I give my answer. I just want to give you sort of a little bit of background on Richard Spencer outside of that specific event where he wasn't particularly aggressive. My research, because of my political stance into Richard Spencer, I pulled up clips where when he's actually at universities and rather than being in public, he will, number one, surround himself with these big skinhead guards, and he will, and he's much harsher than Milo. I don't think that people should necessarily put them in the same basket. Spencer will challenge hippies for the implication that they can't whip him. You know, if they have some kind of a confrontational T-shirt, he says to them basically, "Why don't you come up here and kick my ass?" And I have the footage of that in the video that I did on Richard Spencer.
I think I've seen that actually. So, someone else linked it to me. He was being antagonistic with someone trying to, basically seemingly with the goal of getting to attack him. But I mean, that to me is nothing. Certainly not worthy of the actual attack. And also the fact that it seems like it'd probably benefit him to get attacked is actually a good argument aside from the ethical argument against attacking him. One would assume.
Okay, well, yeah, sorry. I don't think that.
The question really is like, how do you justify punching him in the first place? Is he even a Nazi?
Okay, from what I have, you know, when you talk about Richard Spencer, you have to talk about MPI and you have to talk about millennial woes because they are very much so sort of a sergeant and lieutenant situation.
Really?
They are very close.
I think millennial woes and Richard Spencer have somewhat different beliefs.
Well, millennial woes is a little less of a politician than Richard Spencer is. Richard Spencer is sort of an attempt at an ethno-fascist lobbyist group, right? Because MPI is supposed to be like their version of a think tank in the white supremacy category. Millennial woes is more so kind of into poetics and stuff like that, but they do, I mean, if you watch the millennial between Spencer and woes, they are very much so in sync on the basic substance. But addressing your original question, because it's a fair question, I know that is the crux of, you know, the question that your audience probably has about Antifa. My problem with condemning the assault of Richard Spencer is that Richard Spencer that moment does not exist in a vacuum. Richard Spencer is an active advocate for violence.
Is he?
Is that fair to say?
Could you give me an example?
Okay, so here's, aside from the whole taunting hippies thing, which I know can be, you're allowed to speak, even if it's sort of speech where it's like, come at me, bro. I get that. He's on a college campus and he's being he's sort of doing like a professional wrestler exhibition of his masculinity. The philosophical center of Spencer's white ethno-state is deportation. Is that fair?
I probably don't know as much about it as you do, but I've heard him talk about deportation, or not using that word, but yeah, I'd say so.
He's used the term peaceful ethnic cleansing, and to him, this is a two-pronged strategy that also Millennial Wolves will endorse, which is basically we will offer the impure, which is a wide category for them of non-heterosexual, non-cisgender, non-white, and you can't be Jewish. There's a long list. We're all aware.
Every ideologue has a category of impures, Antifa included. But go on.
Okay, but okay, you will not meet an Antifa who is on a platform of removing people en masse by force.
Okay, no, but just removing people that don't say things that they agree with by force.
Okay, getting into a scrap in the street with someone is not the same as trying to attain political power so that you can.
No, but terrorism is. Terrorism is. You talked about Richard Spencer being an advocate of violence, and what do you think the Antifa are when they plan, obviously advocate, and carry out acts of violence against people who simply say things that they disagree with, in order to silence them, in order to physically attack them, to discourage them from continuing what they're doing? By every definition I can find that's relevant, and I can give you the definitions, Antifa are a terrorist organization.
Okay, are there any national classification? Is there any state or country that has them legally classified as a terrorist group in line with neo-Nazis and American patriot militias and stuff like that? Because those are classified by the United States government and the Southern Poverty Law Center as.
I honestly couldn't give less of a fuck what the Southern Poverty Law Center says. They said that Pepe was a symbol of white nationalism, so I mean they're disreputable, but it doesn't really matter who has currently classified them, because I think that will change soon. But by the definition, they definitely fit. I can give you the U.S. Legal definition and the FBI definition if you like. They fit it by both easily.
Yeah, I have a general understanding of it. I am not someone who endorses political terror. I don't endorse targeted assassinations. I don't endorse the bombing of civilians or crashing of planes or any of that stuff. That's ISIS stuff. I'm not here to excuse vandalism, but I would say, not to an extent in a defense, a lot of what Antifa, as they've been typified in the press and in the United States at least, because I know the French Antifa and the Greek Antifa have been engaged in one-on-one violence with the police. But in America, the Antifa have generally, the highest tier of violence they've engaged in is basically property destruction and vandalism. I'm not sure if I would classify that as terror.
Well, they have attacked several people as well.
Okay, but are they? Okay, so we got, and again, it's going to seem like I'm going on a tangent. Okay, you got the most recent white nationalist terror attack in Montreal. You're aware of this, right?
Yeah. Pales in comparison to what the Antifa is doing.
Okay, so obviously there has not been a case of Antifa engaging in mass murder in North America. Is that fair?
Mass murder, no, but political violence, yes. And it's done on a much larger scale, and it's not being dealt with the same way that the thing in Quebec was. where he was arrested, and justice was done entirely against all the people who were criminals involved, whereas a lot of Antifa get away with it.
Okay. How do you delineate? I don't want to make a complete digression because I don't want you to feel like I'm deflecting your questions, which are very valid. How do you delineate Richard Spencer from that attack if they're all part of one white nationalist movement? Isn't that Richard Spencer's Black Bloc acting out?
No. I mean, Richard Spencer and the people that you would like to associate him with, they just talk about issues. They just espouse ideas. And as far as I know, Richard Spencer doesn't espouse any violent ideas.
Well, hold on. The guy was traced back into those white nationalist alt-right circles. Now, is he off the hook if he was in my circle and he, if after the attack of him killing 5, let's say people like Spencer, if someone went to NPI and shot up, and I'm not advocating for this, I absolutely not. Some nut job gets an automatic rifle, goes to Washington, and decides he's going to be a hero and shoot 5 or 6 people at that NPI meeting where they did the Heil Trump. It's virtually the same circumstance if you find my videos and links to my Antifa group. Why is that a difference? Why is that qualitatively different than what's happening with that shooter and the alt-right?
I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. What are you trying to draw a comparison between here?
Okay, the shooter, the Montreal shooter, was actively involved online with the white nationalist wing of the alt-right. That's been demonstrated.
Okay.
Okay. He went guided by those principles, and I'm not specifically saying Richard Spencer, but it's the same faction of thought. Guided by those principles, he took anti-Muslim sentiment into a mosque and killed 6 people because he perceived himself as a hero of this political movement. This is an act of terror. It's not just a random nut job.
I see what you're saying. So, so you're drawing a parity between what Antifa might do and what that white supremacist allegedly did. And you're saying that the white supremacist is a terrorist, but the Antifa wouldn't be because Antifa aren't terrorists.
If we escalated to that point where one of my people, for example, from my chapter, decides he's going to be a hero, he gets himself an automatic weapon, he goes down to NPI, which is Richard Spencer's think tank, he goes to one of their meetings and he shoots down 6 people.
You would say that that's terrorism?
Yes. To me,
but you wouldn't say that political violence. You wouldn't say that political violence against non-combatants is terrorism. Okay,
what are we? Are we talking about someone getting punched in the face, or are we talking about someone getting shot, stabbed? I mean, we have to talk about magnitude here. That's my point. Is that what kind of magnitude are we talking about here? Are we talking about
the term terrorism means premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents.
It's
really irrelevant.
Okay, for example, the EDL. I'm going to use an example from your side of the pond. The English Defense League has been involved in the protesters related to EDL have been involved in vandalism, riots, and have had some correlation to skinhead gangs. Am I correct from what I've seen in the media over here?
I don't know enough about them to say, but maybe.
Okay, so you have a general image of the EDL protests in your mind, right?
I haven't seen them, but I'll take your word for it for now.
Okay, I'm gonna just pass this on to you. They look like their most militant protesters and rioters look like their version of Antifa. They're just white nationalists, or if you want to call them just English nationalists. They have the scarf on the face with the English flag and stuff like that, and they engage in this sort of this rioting and vandalism stuff like that. Do you consider the English Defense League a protest movement or a terrorist organization?
If they fit the definition that I read out just now, then they're a terrorist organization, in my opinion, or they should be classified as well. Obviously, that's the US definition, but I imagine the UK one's not too far different. but I don't know. I haven't seen the violence. I don't know if they've actually done violence against people. I mean, like rioting probably is good enough to be classed as violence, especially if it's intended to intimidate someone, as the UC Berkeley one was. And UC Berkeley actually was violence against people as well.
Okay. What I'm going to ask you, and this is in reference to this, what do you consider the difference between uncivil disobedience and terrorism? Because both involve breaking the law.
Violence.
And, yes.
Violence is the difference.
Okay. Uncivil disobedience can involve a bunch of labor protesters getting into a scuffle with the police, and some police get lumped up, and some protesters get lumped up. Do you understand what I'm asking you? Where, at what point do in the United States in the early 20th century, the anarchist movement was very closely related to the labor movement, and a lot of the labor protests got with the police. Are those people who now? Okay.
Did the Antifa protesters start the violence, or did the police? Because that's not necessarily critical, but it might be important. Because if they were acting in physical self-defense, then you could make the argument that doesn't count.
But they did step outside the law. There would be violence where strike breakers would get killed, and labor union activists who were anarchists would get killed. My concern is that at what point do we start counting where the law has been justifiably broken? At what point does the violence become an unfortunate byproduct of a struggle for justice, for lack of a better term? I'm just using that in reference to anarchism and the labor movement, for example.
Action against a state which has unjustified laws can be justified, but it doesn't prevent you from being a terrorist if you're performing violence. And yes, that is to say that not all terrorists are necessarily bad, but I think to make the argument that the US has rampant unjustified laws, especially the ones that were being broken at the UC Berkeley protests, would be kind of ridiculous.
Okay, well,
I mean, the laws against beating unconscious people, you know, on the street, that seems like a just law to me.
Yeah, I completely that clip I've seen, and I completely condemn that mob beating of that. I don't care what he did, that beating that guy down into the ground. I completely condemn that. I don't think that's philosophically in line with the large movement. And again, any movement can contain this little corner of highly irrational people, reactionary fringe people. The majority of anti-fascists.
What about the woman who got maced in the face out of nowhere?
Oh, that was also Berkeley, right?
Yeah. I mean, how many examples do we have to find in the coming weeks and months of Antifa violence before we start to realize that maybe there's something linking the two? It's not just a few crazies among the block.
Okay, well, macing someone and beating someone into a bloody pulp on the ground, while they're both objectionable and they are a violation of a person's personal agency, they are not the same magnitude of crime. No criminal law in my country, no judge in this country would sentence someone the same for nearly beating someone to death. And
why does that matter? They're both violent crimes.
Okay, but
racism isn't even a crime, and yet Antifa use it as a mechanism to justify anything.
Racism in a passive sense and racism in an active sense are different threats.
Racism is a motivation.
Right, but the end of this public racism, language becomes politics, politics become power, power becomes violence. Is that fair?
I mean, you can interpret it that way.
Okay, this is a theory, right? This is my theory. This is the chain of thought that goes through most anti-fascist groups when you see something like that Milo Yiannopoulos thing happen. Is in our head, we see Milo speak. We see Milo boost political candidates. We see political candidates take power. We see political candidates start using force. You kind of see the domino effect.
I'm sorry. Who's using, which political candidates are using force?
The eventuality. The theory is that the eventuality of what Spencer's speech and Yiannopoulos' speech will end in is people that they support, people that they empower, like Trump, reaching political office, and then in order to maintain their credibility with the supporters that got them in, they start engaging in this targeted political violence, whether it's deportations or campaigns of violence.
So what you're saying is that Antifa are using preemptive strikes against what they perceive to be likely violence in the future, and so it's definitely not self-defense.
No one would make the case that punching Richard Spencer in the face was self-defense. Not even myself.
I've heard people make that case. I've heard people make that case. I'm afraid I couldn't bring it up right now. I can't remember who it was, but I have heard people make that case.
Not valid. Not valid. You can say that you were engaged in an act of revolutionary violence, but you can't say that you were defending yourself from someone who never hit you. At least in my opinion and my understanding of red and black socialism, it's not self-defense to defend yourself. There's no means of self-defense from someone who just wasn't doing anything.
Okay, so I think it's good that we seem to agree on that philosophically. And if I had thought of this before the show, I would have brought up some examples. But let me just ask then, what is left at this point to justify violence or to justify political action beyond what's legal against the state? Like, what exactly is left to justify it?
I want to give you a little bit of background on myself that maybe will inform my answer very quickly. I come from, do you know where the Bronx is in New York?
I don't exactly, but I know it's in New York.
Okay. Do you know the Bronx's reputation as a city, as a borough of New York City?
Sort of.
Okay. What is the worst slum in London? Is it Birmingham? Like, where is the most?
Birmingham's not in London. I think East London would count as the worst.
Okay, so that is like the deepest, like, inner city poverty and violence and all that stuff, right?
I think so.
Okay, so in New York, of the 5 boroughs for about 40 years now, the Bronx statistically has been the poorest congressional district per capita in the United States. Period. In the entire country, it's the most savage borough in spite of a little bit of gentrification happening here and there, and we are the poorest people in this country. Worse than Mississippi swamps, worse than the Ozarks, any of that stuff. My father was a radical leftist, like me. He was in a Latin revolutionary politics, like sort of a Latino version of the Black Panthers. Are you up on the Black Panthers?
I'm aware of what they are, yeah.
Okay, the Black Panthers are not black nationalists. They're revolutionary black communists.
Oh, that's much better.
No, I'm just making a distinction. I'm not making a moral distinction. Okay. So the Young Lords, which my father was a part of when I was a child, was the Latino analog in the of this revolutionary communist activist movement. And this is where it's relevant. The Black Panthers and the Young Lords would go to protests armed with guns, crowbars, baseball bats. And there was a lot of outcry like this in this country at that time, that these people needed to be classified as terrorists. There were campaigns by the FBI, particularly against the Black Panthers, targeted assassination campaigns by Richard Nixon in the 1970s that were justified by the principle that somehow the Black Panthers were an insurgent force, that they were terrorists. So my point as it relates to what we were discussing is people in poverty, when they protest, part of what is important is that you broadcast as loud as possible how bad things are where you live. Los Angeles riots. Do you see where I'm going?
It sounds like you're trying to justify violence by saying that that's what'll get in the press.
I'm going to have to split a hair there. It's not about the press as so much as the
public conscience.
The public conscience.
Okay, well that's not much better.
And I'm not talking deliberately. I'm talking about in these poverty scenarios, what starts off as passive protest can sometimes degenerate into vandalism, violence. And I'm not sure that I can point my finger in condemnation when people who are getting pressed on like that receive no redress, and then everything degenerates into this sort of sloppy mess. I don't know that I can stand there and point my finger as someone who grew up in this very deep poverty and under police brutality and all that stuff. Do you see what the point that I'm trying to make?
Okay, that's fine, but then let me ask, for the last few years we've had SJW protests of all kinds of things. We've had the Women's March as well, all kinds of protests that have remained peaceful, some that have turned violent, but not for an obvious reason. But then we have several violent Antifa protests near each other. Do you think that maybe this indicates that Antifa might have something to do with the violence? It's not just a few individuals that go crazy and mess things up for the people that just wanted a peaceful protest where they're anonymous, black clad, and they have baseball bats with them?
That is a sub faction of a movement. That is not the mainstream of that movement. That's like saying the mainstream of Black Lives Matter is the people who riot or the people who bring violence. I mean, that's you may hold that opinion, but I don't hold that opinion that the Black Bloc is the vanguard. Is that your implication, that the Black Bloc is the vanguard of the Antifa movement?
It certainly seems to be. I mean, you were talking about getting into the public conscience. That's what the public face of the Antifa is. But I'm not even trying to paint the entire movement by its radicals. I'm just saying that the radicals appear to be the ones having the greatest effect. I mean, if you look at other protests, they don't turn violent, even when they're very ideological. But the Antifa does turn violent.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going to theory because I don't want you to feel like I disagree with you on the principle of people having personal agency. I'm not interested in staging violence that targets people, and the people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis in the red and black socialist movement are not actively setting up campaigns for to create this mass vandalism or these targeted attacks. There is a faction within that does degenerate in the public square, but I think you pointed out something interesting, which was that the violence, and I did a video explaining the what came out of Richard Spencer getting punched, and I don't know whether this is a justification. Who Richard Spencer was in terms of a figurehead, that he was this glossy new Nazi. I'm just going to use that for the sake of hyperbole, okay? The image of who Richard Spencer was went from he could be the next president to he's a joke.
I disagree. I disagree entirely. I think that might be viewed through an Antifa lens. I think what happened was Richard Spencer was an irrelevant person that some people have maybe heard of, and now he's viewed as a legitimately concerning for the radical, violent left figure of new right politics. And the new right is popular right now. And he's more extreme than the populist right, the center right. But I think he's been granted legitimacy by the attacks on him by the rabid radicals.
hold on, but what was before Hailgate? Let's examine a window of the public first meeting Richard Spencer, because I've watched him for a long time for obvious reasons. When Richard Spencer popped up, there was a fever, even in the left-wing, center-left press like Mother Jones and The Atlantic, about, look at this glossy name.
Sorry, just to interrupt. I love how you think that those publications are center-left. Please continue.
Okay, well, okay, give me one example of what you consider center-left. Slate?
I don't think that there are many center-left publications.
Do you, no disrespect, but do you consider the Huffington Post to be a far-left online publication?
Not far left to the point of anti-far, but far left to the point of rabid SJWs, yeah, which is not that far off.
Do you consider Hillary Clinton's campaign to have been a far-left campaign?
No, because she's a corporatist. It was barely left. But she appealed to the leftists.
She wasn't an SJW candidate. The SJW candidate in that primary was Bernie Sanders.
I think they both appealed in different ways. The SJWs are massive identity politicians, so they like the, vagina, rather than the old white man. I think Bernie was more of a symbol of just progressives, which includes some SJWs, but some sane progressives as well. I think the sane progressives were on his side.
Did Black Lives Matter not endorse Bernie?
Maybe. Did they? Probably. I don't know why. I mean, Black Lives Matter is a disparate organization, after all, a set of organizations.
But come on, I mean...
They also raided this protest. And when I say raided, I mean, obviously, like, they took the stage.
There were two people that interrupted him during a conversation. They were also Native American people, and he let them speak. The entire movement didn't protest against Bernie Sanders. And they certainly didn't protest for Hillary Clinton. I'm just trying to establish where the political spectrum lines up.
I think it's probably easier to say that we both have a different perspective of where it is based on our own position. I'm sorry to have interrupted your point. Do continue.
That's fine. Okay, you're entitled to your opinion. I just want to ask one question about Clinton. How far is she on the English political spectrum from Thatcher?
I don't think the differences between the UK and US political spectrum are as simple as just shifted left or right, or even shifted authoritarian libertarian. I think there's too many other factors to really consider it. But she's definitely more corporatist than you'd find here, because there's less corporate involvement in politics here. She appeals more to the radical left than you could here, even though she isn't herself more radical left. Corbyn is more of a classical socialist, whereas Clinton is just like I think you call them a neocon or neoliberal, which is just the corporatists.
Yeah, like New Labour. She's like New Labour. She's on that Tony Blair.
It's like New Labour with double the corporatism and double the globalism.
Yeah, but that's because you guys have three parties, right? You have like a graded. Well, let me just give me some clarification. The Tories are like the far right conservative party.
Well, they're not
right?
far right; they're center right, especially now.
Okay, what about the Liberal Democrats?
Pretty much unelectable. They never get more than about 5 to 10%. But they're I guess they're pretty middle left. And then Labour are supposed to be center left, but recently they've turned more towards the radical end, but not to the extent of communism quite.
Well, you had a reflection of what happened here, didn't you? Isn't the Corbyn fracture sort of like a twin of the Bernie Sanders fracture inside the Democratic Party?
I think it was actually happening here a bit earlier than the US. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, it's similar. I mean, the left is losing everywhere in the West these days.
Okay, but Britain, Corbyn is a reaction to austerity. Is that fair?
Partially, yes, but I think he's also an avatar of the delusional left.
Okay, well, okay. I can respect that there's multiple tiers, but the Sanders Democrats and the Corbyn labor movement are, Europe got hit by this kind of like, the extreme left. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a product of the center left imposing these sort of like brutal austerity measures. I was watching the whole process. When the center, whether it's center left or center right, embraces, even the French socialists and the Greek Socialist Party embrace this corporate austerity policy, you are going to create more discontent, and you're going to push both of the poles out to the left and right. The Obama administration engaged in austerity around the same time. He's the reason that Spencer came up on the right and that Sanders came up on the left.
The policies of the establishment left are enough.
Well, the right wing in our country was the one that pushed, has always pushed the Democrats into austerity programs. I mean, the austerity program is a mechanism of the right wing. It's a twofold thing of privatization and obsession with balanced budgets and paying off a bunch of debt that you can just write off.
That sounds more like just a corporatist thing, which all politicians for the last few decades in the US have been.
Yeah, but what are there anti-business right-wing politics?
Well, not anti-business, no, but non-corporatist. Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Well, you're not going to like it, but Trump.
Okay, but I'm willing to respect your example if I can understand it. If you explain it to me.
So Trump obviously is corporate himself. He's very wealthy, but he's not part of the corporate sort of influence structure. He's not part of their interest. He's very much, at least in what he advocates publicly, not necessarily in his private intent. We don't really know about that, but if we're going by what he advocates, then he is a traitor to the corporate class in the US.
What did he do before he became president?
I don't know, probably a lot of the same things they were doing.
What was his title? He still holds his job.
So
what's the title of his job?
I don't know, probably CEO.
Of the Trump Corporation.
Okay. I already said he is part of a corporation himself.
Okay. Was Hillary Clinton a CEO of a corporation?
Why does this matter? She represented their interests. Trump doesn't represent their interests.
So how does someone from within their own ranks, a billionaire CEO, not represent his own interests? I don't understand how...
No, not his own interests. He doesn't need to. He's already rich. He represents the interests of the people, or at least tries to, or at least seems to want to, because he's betrayed the corporate class that he was once part of. You can be individually a CEO of a corporation without representing the interests of the corporate class.
Okay, but he's done that rhetorically. What has he actually done, either as a private businessman or as a public servant?
I mean, he's only been in office for a little while. I'm sure if I look through his executive orders, you could find something. But assuming that he would have done something before he even ran for president is a bit silly. But I'm sure you could find examples regardless. I mean, it doesn't really matter what he did before his presidential run.
Okay, so you see me. Let's say that I decided to get into politics and become mayor. You can point back at things that I did as a worker, as a union organizer, as all that stuff that led up into me going into politics. And you can go, well, Bronx, if I asked you that question about me, you can go, Bronx, he did A, B, and C progressive thing. I'm just asking, just so I can understand. He neither in private business, and he's been in private business for 40 years. He's been in public office for 90 days, and he literally has done nothing that would verify what you just claimed his position in.
Well, he hasn't been president for 90 days. He's been president for about 3 weeks.
It feels like 90 days. It feels like it. It feels like it.
Okay. Well, there's some good examples from chat that I had. I'm sure I would have remembered if I'd taken a look. But destroying the TPP, getting out of that was one of the first things he did. That was definitely anti-corporatist, anti-globalist, and any corporatist who has an interest in the corporatist agenda, the corporatist class interests, would not have got out the TPP.
Clinton was against the TPP during her campaign as well.
Was she?
Did she?
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I'd heard that she did something to support it at some point during her campaign.
Okay, but at the end of her campaign, was she for the TPP, or was she going to come in office and do what Trump did? Because she did say that she was done with the TPP.
Well, Corbyn has recently switched to being pro-Brexit, which hasn't helped his support very much, because all he had left in his party was anti-Brexit people. That doesn't mean that he's sincere about it. He just recognizes the winds of change. And I think Hillary was looking at that.
But are we going to ping pong back and forth about who's disingenuous or not? Because that could be.
Trump has been against the TPP for a long time, and a lot of other trade deals too. That's one of his main talking points, and something he's been talking about for a long time.
I seem to remember him supporting NAFTA long before he was against it.
I don't know about that. Maybe.
Well, I'm in America. When Clinton was in office, from what I can recollect, because I'm about 36. I do recollect him supporting free trade. I mean, he was a Democrat long before he was a Republican. He only became a Republican during the Obama era. He was a corporate Democrat for most of his public life.
Okay.
Do you see how it is difficult for me to give the guy the benefit of the doubt when all I've seen the guy do privately and publicly sort of just doesn't, there's no substance to the idea of Trump being populist beyond his rhetoric.
Well, I know I've already mentioned this, but you kind of went off to a different point with it. The TPP, getting out of that, that's more than just rhetoric, and that is an importantly anti-corporatist thing to do.
That trade deal was already dead. It was already dead. Clinton knew she couldn't sign it. Trump knew he couldn't sign it.
Okay, but I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is. But either way, I mean, Obama didn't get out of it before he left office.
This is what makes it difficult for people on the left to even make a case against Trump, is that he exists in a political vacuum. I can't point back to Trump's governorship, his mayorship. I can't point to anything to make any case against the guy.
Then just await actions that actually matter, given the benefit of the doubt until then.
I'm a New York active labor organizer. I've encountered the Trump administration many times in the business world.
Okay, but that's just business. In business, you have to be ruthless.
That's not necessarily the case.
Well, it is if you want to be successful, unless you get really lucky.
Are there no progressive billionaires?
What? I didn't say anything about politics. I said ruthless. I'm sure the progressive billionaires were also ruthless at some point.
I'll leave that up to debate. But do you have anyone other than Trump that's a right-wing anti-corporatist? Because citing Trump, the guy, what is he? He's been in office for 3 weeks. Can you give me somebody that had a complete term as a politician that implemented laws or any sort of fiscal policy?
I don't know why I'd have to produce such a thing.
I'm making a polite request so that I can have some kind of
the populist right is all about anti-globalism, and globalism is essentially synonymous with corporatism. The entire movement is that. I mean, you look at, like, Farage is anti-globalism, so I'd imagine he'd be anti-corporatist as well, despite being rich himself.
Okay, but
I don't know enough about him to say specifically.
Okay, you can be anti-corporate. You can be against global corporate capitalism and still be anti-labor.
Well, no, not against capitalism. I mean, who would be against capitalism, right?
I'm saying unfettered. The hyper, World Bank sort of.
Okay. Yeah, I think I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like the IMF style of capitalism. Sort of.
That sounds like you're just describing globalism now.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use that term, but these are global financial institutions that do defend the interests of the wealthy and do punish developing nations and exploit their natural resources and stuff.
That's some of the problem, yes.
Okay, but these are fundamentally right-wing policies. That's what I can't reconcile, is how anyone perceives that somehow the answer to
Actually, no. Globalism is very big on regulations.
Not pro-labor regulations. Do you think the International Monetary Fund is for the worker?
No, but do you think mass unskilled immigration is for the worker? I mean, look, left doesn't have to mean for the worker. That's just one part of the left.
Mass undocumented immigration is
mass unskilled immigration.
So you're saying that even if they're documented, that there's a problem with just unskilled workers moving from one country to another?
Mass unskilled immigration.
Okay, but they're being filtered in at a pace. They're not just running across the border if they're documented.
In the US, maybe, but not in Europe.
Okay, what part of Europe?
The parts that have all the Muslims.
Oh, that's pretty broad, man.
It is. That's the problem. I mean, the migration crisis is not just all those fucking right-wing Europeans and their Islamophobia. It's the result of globalism. It's not like it's just some random thing that happened. It's not just like, okay, there's war in the Middle East, so they all filtered into Europe.
Okay,
it's a part of the plan of globalism.
Okay, so who's the number one villain of that narrative? Merkel?
I don't know, but Merkel is part of the problem, yeah. Pathological deferism.
Is she left?
The policies that are relevant to that problem are very left, yes.
What party is she part of?
As I said, the policies that are relevant to that problem are very left.
Can you give me an example of a left-wing leader who is implementing a similar immigration policy?
Probably a lot of other countries in Europe are left-wing and doing the same.
Pretty broad.
But, I mean, it's a left-wing policy, so why does it matter if the party is left or right-wing?
That's the thing, is how can you assign it to the left wing if a right-wing political party is doing it?
Because I mean, there's nothing necessarily definitive. I mean, all this is approximate, the left and right thing, but when it's couched in terms of compassion and anti-racism and we've got to help people rather than strength, societal strength. I mean, societal strength wouldn't allow mass unskilled immigration, which is the right-wing position, societal strength, and then compassion is the left-wing position.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Are you implying that the right wing never uses empathy in their political narratives? Because they use a lot of empathy in the political narratives, just selective.
They use empathy for the in-group because that's the important group for a nation to be interested in defending.
It's not an objective statement. That's a specifically politically calibrated statement. Not everybody across the political spectrum would agree with that. That's a right-leaning, at the very least, statement.
It is a generous accreditation or assessment, rather, of what they're doing. Yes, but I try to be generous to both sides.
That's fine, but my point is that both ends of the political spectrum exploit empathy in their political arguments because it's called politics. If you want to vote, you have to compel people emotionally to vote. You can't. Or none of the science demonstrates showing people charts and graphs is going to get them to vote for anything.
Okay, but empathy is not quite the same as outgroup compassion, which is what drove the migrant crisis.
Are you talking about migrants or refugees? Those aren't the same.
No, they're not the same, but the proportion is so out of whack that it doesn't really matter. And the refugees I don't really see as a massive problem. Like, obviously, if it was just refugees from Syria, legitimate refugees, then it might cause a little bit of a problem, but it will be worth it because it would be a genuinely humanitarian thing to do. But letting in hundreds of thousands of people from Morocco and all kinds of other countries that aren't at war, and these people went through several other countries that aren't at war in order to get to Germany, where they were granted EU citizenship, which means they can enter the UK without any sort of restriction. Oh, look, the UK left Europe. left the EU. What a surprise!
But what is a legitimate immigrant? Do they have to pass some kind of like they have to be a doctor or something? I'm a little confused.
It doesn't really matter if to my point, it doesn't matter if they're legal or not. The issue is the quantity and the skill level. I mean, if they were all doctors, if it was 100,000 doctors, that would still be a bit of an issue for like space, but it might even be worth doing. But it's not 100,000 doctors. It's not 100,000 engineers. Like not every Middle Easterner is an accredited engineer. A lot of them have no occupation, no skills, and as much as it may hurt to hear it, they just want to go to rich countries to get money.
That's a matter of opinion. I think that's a matter of opinion. I don't think there's any scientist peer-reviewed studies that would verify.
I can't read their minds, no, but there doesn't seem to be any other motivation. Okay,
well, skilled versus unskilled, we can quantify. Welfare lust, it's a little more soft science. My concern is, are we now qualifying the personhood of immigrants by the level of skill that they can bring to a job? I mean, they can learn when they enter into one of these more developed nations. I don't think they're coming there necessarily entirely to exploit the welfare system. I'm not sure if there are multi-generational statistics that would show that second or third generation Muslim immigrants are highly immersed in the social contract in England.
Well, personhood isn't the issue. Citizenship is the issue. And they don't integrate, even after several generations. And schools are already pretty full. The welfare system is already pretty full. And the NHS is already very strained, partly because of the actions of the Conservative government in ruining it, but that's neither here nor there. The problem persists regardless.
Hold on. If we're gonna blame immigrants tacitly for overwhelming a system, then we need to also hold accountable the Conservative politicians who funded them.
I just did. But that's irrelevant now because that's in the past. That has happened. The state is as it is. And it cannot handle, even before the Conservatives ruined it, it wouldn't have been able to handle mass unskilled immigration. No country can. I mean, do you think that there is a point at which too much mass in unskilled immigration does actually hurt a country? Or do you think it's just unlimited?
There's an upward limit of anything. Any sort of ideal can be pushed beyond the limit of what is tenable for a country or people.
That's good, at least, because I talked to someone who said that there is literally no limit. That was quite remarkable. He was German too. So
I'm not a utopianist. I understand that at some point your ideals have to press up against what's practical. I'm just concerned about where that bar is being set based on reactionary politics rather than facts.
Well, the facts bear themselves out. I mean, terrorism is not even one of the major factors, Islamic terrorism. I mean, the issues with these communities existing in these countries alone. I mean, have you seen the crime statistics for Germany, for example?
My understanding is that the XY Eisenfall map has been challenged, if not completely debunked.
My understanding is not that it's been debunked. I'm pretty sure that if you take the statistics from various different sources, you will find the exact same narrative, that it's foreign people, non-German born or of other ethnicities, that commit the vast majority of the crime, especially recent immigrants.
Okay, but specifically that XY Eisenfall document has been, there have been incidences that were duplicated. There have been incidences that have been exaggerated. I'm not saying that it's completely bunk, but I'm just saying that there are some holes in that particular document, and I would rather see some government-issued statistics than a crowd-funded crime map as support for that argument.
I know I could get you the stats, but it would be kind of disruptive for me to do it in the middle of a hangout.
You don't have to run it now. I'm just saying for anybody that's listening, before they quite purchase it completely, they should probably expand the sphere of their studies beyond the most popular example of evidence for that point. That's all I'm saying, is that there needs to be a wider spectrum of sources on that statement generally.
Well, fun fact, I think I'm right in saying the German government recently stopped doing these stats by ethnicity, which is a little bit suspect. But I think the most recent stats we have from the German government themselves clearly bear out the fact that it's foreign people committing all the crimes. But my question is really, as much as I understand that you may believe that this is not real, it does seem like you have a specific need for it not to be.
I am expressing concern as a person of color in the United States of America that has had crime statistics presented from this community as existing in a vacuum as a sign of moral decay rather than the product of a violated social contract.
And you can certainly put it that way if you like, but you can't really know what the reason for it is. And if you can't demonstrate that migrants in Germany are being treated worse than natives, then you don't have any sort of point. And I think what you probably find is that they're being treated better than natives.
You can prove where crime comes from beyond the statistics. I mean, you don't think that's fair?
You can certainly speculate. In some cases, you could prove beyond reasonable doubt, I suppose.
Okay, but do you see the relevance of of trying to go past statistics? If you really want to address this problem, it's not as simple as numbers in, numbers out. You need to find out what is causing these problems. Is it poor?
You have no idea how much I recognize that the causes of these statistics are important.
Okay.
But
do you just mark it up to cultural Islam, or?
I think Islam's part of it, but I don't think it's even necessarily most of it. I think it's just a foreign culture. Or perhaps even just lack of respect for the culture that they're now living in. Lack of integration. I mean, really, integration is the cusp of the issue here.
It's not. Disrespect is not intrinsic, is it? Their children aren't born with a gene to
no, but
hard.
They're born into Muslim ghettos to Muslim parents who aren't integrated. They go to Muslim majority schools. They go to Muslim places of worship. And in some of these places of worship, they get radicalized, or by some things they see on the internet, which pass through their filters because they're Islamic. And it turns out they come from the Islamic State, and they're being propagated on Twitter. Oh, good job banning Milo, Twitter.
Okay, well, okay. Here's not necessarily a counterpoint, but here's a companion point. The majority of right-wing white nationalist terrorists do come from majority white areas. They are super concentrated in these rural areas in the United States and North America. I mean, you could probably make the same case of them not integrating into the wider culture with their Christian fundamentalism and their radical anti-abortion. I mean, it's just what do you do with them?
Okay, well, even if there's a valid point of lack of integration there, which I don't think there is because they are natives by definition, do you know what the most prominent terrorist motivator or ideology in the world is? Islamic. Do you know what the second most is?
Enlighten me.
Sorry?
Enlighten me. I don't know those numbers.
Communist. I don't know where the right-wing terror groups fall in the hierarchy, but it's definitely not first or second, and first and second are Islamic and communist. I could show you the figures. I don't have them to hand.
But I can really only speak deeply to my own country, and if you do the numbers on North America, and particularly the United States of America, white supremacy is right up at the tippy top.
At the top? I mean, I don't know, maybe. I mean, it depends how far back you're looking.
How far back do you want to look?
I mean, recent would be good, something in the last few years. But I mean, the US is not a great example because we're not just talking about the US in terms of the problem with integration. I mean, there barely is a problem with Muslim integration in the US. It's a minor thing. That's really a problem in Europe.
I'm thankful for you conceding that point, because it's very reasonable and not everybody
Which point? Hello? Holy shit, we've lost him. I bet the non-Islamic terrorists got him. Maybe the communists. Wait, no, the white supremacists. Well, he did say he was on his phone. Apologies for this, chat. Yeah, looks like we've lost him. Maybe he'll pop back in a sec. I have to say, my chat is quite pro-me. I wasn't quite expecting that. Richard Spencer got him. Yeah, maybe Richard Spencer sucker punched him. I'll just re-chat for a bit until he comes back. Hopefully he will come back. Oh, he's dropped out. We'll wait a second. He already has the Oh, there he is. You back?
I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but my call dropped.
No worries.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay. Great. Please continue.
What was I saying?
You were responding to the American Muslims being more integrated.
Yes, you said that I'd conceded a point. I'm not sure which one you meant. I was asking which one.
Yeah, the American Muslim population, particularly in the city that I live in, is very quickly and very well integrated. So it's difficult for me to fathom the European population, because over here, when Muslim immigrants come to New York City, they usually integrate within 1 generation.
Okay, that may be true. I don't know about that specifically. But I mean, the issue in the US is not particularly with the integration of Muslims, but the issue in Europe definitely is, and there's also a lot more terrorism in Europe, and I think there's the sort of you could call it fear mongering, but I think it's a genuine concern from in the US about Islam is based on what's happened in Europe. So I don't think it's any legitimate concern.
Yeah, but then now you're back to where we were. Where are you guys taking action against future Muslim fascism? You know what I mean? Like, is taking action against potential harm justified or not? Is it reactionary or not?
Okay, but we're not committing violence against Muslims because of what they might do in the future. In fact, people take great care not to be seen to be oppressing Muslims in any way, even if they legally deserve it.
Skinheads in England don't engage in anti-Muslim vandalism.
Okay, but skinheads in England are a very minor faction.
Not to the people that are getting beat down, not to the people that are getting robbed, murdered, raped. I mean, to say minor,
okay, but Muslims do that kind of thing as well. You heard of Sharia patrols?
Okay, but
I mean, at some point, you might have to wonder if people like the EDL, skinheads, that kind of people, are genuinely doing it in self-defense. I don't know, but maybe.
That's very, very questionable on whether or not a bunch of Nazis are defending themselves.
Okay, but the people who become, I mean, for example, Tommy Robinson lived in a place with a lot of Muslim immigration, a lot of unskilled Muslim immigration, or unintegrated Muslims. He didn't become a campaigner for what he believes in because he was like distant from the problem, just like a lot of rich people in London don't. He became the way he is, he has the beliefs he does, because he was close to the problem. The same may be true of the people that you're talking about. I don't know much about them. But
are you claiming that Tommy Robinson's xenophobia is justified just because he lived in a neighborhood where there are mean Muslims?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question. For one thing, I don't know if I describe it as xenophobia. That implies that it's against everyone that's an outsider and it's emotional, which I don't think is true on either count.
Tommy Robinson is not emotional? He's not. No, I'm saying Tommy Robinson specifically. We're talking about here. Tommy Robinson is 100% emotion. Are you claiming that he's irrational?
That's not what I said. Though I do think that he believes what he believes for good reasons, or at least what he would consider rational reasons. It's not just hatred. I don't see any hatred in Tommy Robinson, to be quite honest with you. But I haven't. I've just watched his
Millennial Woes. I'm sorry, Millennial Woes will make that same point.
Yeah, and I don't think there's necessarily any hatred in Millennial Woes either.
Excuse me? Do you know who Millennial Woes is?
What's the most hateful thing he said, in your opinion?
You can go to my channel and you can watch a video that Spinosaurus posted where he talked about endorsing slavery and bombing of ships carrying Muslim migrants to the West.
Oh, I think I remember the thing about bombing migrants. I don't think that was. I think that was a reluctant endorsement of something which would be done to safeguard Western civilization. I don't agree with it, but I don't think he was inciting violence. I don't think it's necessarily hateful. But I mean, Spino and I disagree a lot in this kind of area.
Okay, but let's get to base facts. Is Millennial Woes a white nationalist?
I think so. I can't remember specifically what he said to support that, but I think so. Yeah.
Okay. He's specifically a white nationalist. He uses the term the white race. He talks about the white race being tainted by Africa, and specifically, he did talk about that he condoned slavery. And excuse me, in that same video, the Führer in a bathrobe, you'll see the clip where he talks about he believes that lists of names of people who are enemies to the white race should be kept so that when they take power, those people will be executed.
Okay, so he's authoritarian.
Okay, so I don't understand how that makes it excusable. I mean, what he's advocating is violence. He's advocating his enemies being executed when his movement takes power. He's advocating that they be taken as slaves, and basically interned. At what point does this guy hit the limit of his free speech being harmless?
Oh, well, his free speech has no limits when it comes to expression of ideas. And perhaps some of the things he says are hateful. I don't know, but I mean, ascribing motive is a dangerous game to play, especially when you're using it to tar them with a charged label. But maybe it's true. I don't know. But a lot of cases, people who are tarred with these labels are not actually hateful. I don't see it in Tommy Robinson. Perhaps there is some in Millennial Woes. I don't know. Perhaps he is emotional about it.
How is coldly advocating for a kill list to be made of your political enemies not hateful?
Well, I don't think he would see it as political enemies. He would see it as people who have jeopardized what he views as civilization. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with this, but it's not an outrageous position. It's not a particularly unusual position for someone to advocate punishment for treason. He would see it as the same thing, but he's also authoritarian, so he would see that the punishment being worthy of being death, execution.
So you can have people executed without hating them.
He probably does hate them, but all I'm saying is it's not necessary for him to hate them to hold the views that or for someone like him to hold the kind of views that they do. Perhaps Millennial Woes is, I don't know.
I would say that
the label hatred is way too easily applied.
I would say that in order to advocate that people be executed, either targeted assassinations or en masse, you must hate those groups of people regardless of who they are. How can you advocate for someone to be executed just because, oh well, it's impartial, it's impassionate, but whatever, execute that guy?
I mean, that's not too difficult to answer. It could easily just be a pragmatic consideration. I'm not saying that's justified, but it doesn't have to be hateful.
Execution can be a pragmatic decision.
I don't know why you're saying that like it's ridiculous. I didn't say it's a good idea.
How is summary execution pragmatic?
I don't think it's pragmatic, but they might.
We're not asking what they think. You said that it could be a pragmatic solution. You didn't say they think. You said it could be.
I don't think I said a pragmatic solution, but I thought it was obvious that I meant in their opinion. Like it could be a pragmatic policy.
Not in any sort of substantial way. There's nothing practical about any form of execution. If you are for this kind of non-violent principle, then execution needs to be completely off the table during political conversations.
Actually, execution is often the ethical thing to do.
Can you give me an example?
Have you read Machiavelli?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that I endorse his stance on execution, but give me your opinion.
Well, I assume that you've heard the relevant part that I'm referring to, but if you dethrone someone and there is still some element of their power base left afterwards, the chances of them rising up to start a civil war against you is supposedly quite high. And so it's ethical to just demolish the entire power base as soon as you take power. So there's definitely an ethical argument for execution. Again, I don't know how we've got on this tangent. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying.
No. We're talking about politics and violence, and we're talking about violence and ethics. So I think that it's all relevant. It's all part of one thing, because we're talking about, if I made that point you just made, people will go Antifa. They just want to kill everybody. Am I wrong?
Well, no, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying that you could make the argument that it's a good idea for like rational reasons, and I'm sure Antifa has such rationalizations. I just disagree with them the same way as I disagree with the white nationalists making the same arguments.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that I get your opinion. You do not consider any form of execution acceptable in the course of politics, whether it's taking power, maintaining power, or protesting politically.
I suppose that it's possible that there would be situations where it would be acceptable, but only if it's obvious that it would save lives in the future. But I think generally no. But I mean, if we're looking at specific cases, there's no specific case anywhere near what Antifa perceives that would be justifiable. I mean, it's not self-defense. It's a preeminent strike against political opponents who say things you don't like.
Okay, so it's unacceptable or it's not. That's going to be a 100% answer, isn't it? I mean, it's either yes, you can execute people to protect people in the future, or no, you can't perpetrate violence to protect future victims, because how far in advance is the past and how far in the future is the future?
I'm not sure what you mean. Regardless, I mean, if it was justifiable, if I found it justifiable ethically for an execution to occur, which I think is very unlikely that I would, even judging on Machiavelli's advice, it would be based solely on that advice. It wouldn't be just random political assassinations from person to person. It would be if the new state that's just overthrown an oppressive power has a member of the enemy's power base left, and there's a good chance of civil war in the future, and there's still some sort of pawns on the board, then maybe it would be ethically acceptable to do that. But this is a distant hypothetical. This is very far removed from reality.
Stalin engaged in these reign of terrors and these mass purges and these show trials. Exactly what you described happened under Stalin.
Not even close to what I'm describing here.
Was their purging? Even Castro did this. Most of Castro's executions were purges of people that were left over from Batista. Exactly what you described.
Stalin, no, pawns and leaders is quite different. Stalin killed people because they were good at farming.
His accusation for a lot of the people that he killed within his own organization were that they were sympathizers with the prior ruling elites.
Okay, but that's not a good justification, even ethically.
But it's the same thing as you just said. It's people. His claim that these people were doing what Machiavelli said, which is that they're sticking around and they're threatening.
Machiavelli is talking about leaders, potential leaders, like a prince if you've killed the king, for example. Mm-hmm. He's not talking about citizenry who might be amicable to it. There's an entire different section in the book about that. Several, in fact, I think, where he talks about how to make yourself amicable to them as a prince.
Okay, so we did go a little far afield. So let's recenter on your concerns, because I know that my invitation here was to sort of examine the concerns, because the political environment in the West is getting very tense, and both fascists and anti-fascists are starting to flare up. Either one is rhetorically and the other one's in terms of evangelism, however you want to frame that. What do you, as an observer, think the reconciliation point going forward is? What is the alternative for the people who busted glass at Berkeley?
Enter the free marketplace of ideas like everyone else.
Okay, but free markets are not a universal.
That's just a euphemistic name. Free marketplace of ideas is what I said.
No, I understand what you're saying, but when you talk to certain groups of people, they don't believe that there should necessarily be a free marketplace of ideas because they would implement hate speech laws as a buffer to this concept of maximalist free speech.
Okay, they don't have to take part if they don't want to, but violence is still illegal. They have the option to take part in the free marketplace of ideas in order to enact their preferences politically, democratically, because that's the system that they've grown up in.
Okay, but does that include Richard Spencer implementing his goals as long as he does them politically, politely, and using speech?
He can advocate whatever he wants, and as long as he's not directly inciting violence.
Hold on, that was not my question. My question is, if Richard Spencer achieves his goal politely and politically...
If he's elected democratically, I mean, there's nothing illegitimate in his election.
You do know what Richard Spencer advocates, right?
You do know what the Antifa advocates, right?
Yeah, I surely do know that the Antifa do not advocate what Richard Spencer does.
Okay, but they do advocate violence, or at least some of them do.
Okay,
and
but even
they actually committed.
Worst. Wait a minute. Hold on. Respectfully, even the very worst black bloc anarchist is not advocating ethnic cleansing.
Well, you missed out an important word there. Peaceful ethnic cleansing.
Is peaceful ethnic cleansing acceptable?
I would not advocate it myself, but it's certainly a lot less bad than ethnic cleansing, which, by the way, is something that I think almost all, if not all, communist regimes have ever done. So, I mean, if we're talking about left-wing radicals here, I mean, no communist dictatorship, or as far as I know, no communist dictatorship started off as an authoritarian dictatorship. They all started with a ANCOM or similar revolution, which then became authoritarian communist. It's basically written into the ideology that will definitely...
Yeah, I know the history of the Red and White Army and the anarchists. I agree with you, but I mean, you could say that about a lot of other... I mean, the majority of right-wing revolutions start from generals taking power from civilian leaders. So, I mean, it's not like there's some kind of a clean end of authoritarian dictatorships. Right? Anything right-wing
Richard Spencer's not a general, but the ANCOM protesters are exactly the useful idiots who are going to bring about communism if they get their way. Authoritarian communism, that is. Not that I think that's likely to happen in the US.
For whom? Who are these factions within the military and the political apparatus that are going to support? Where's our Chavez?
Oh, I didn't say it was likely. In fact, I just said I don't think it is particularly likely to happen. Not impossible, though. But I don't think that there's particularly an apparatus to permit fascism in the US either.
That is highly debatable.
Go on, say it. Trump's a fascist. Go on, say it.
No. FDR was a fascist. You know Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
Was he leading in a democratic system, and did he step down when his term was over?
No, he was forced out by the Supreme Court, and he interned the Japanese wrongfully in concentration camps. He was just a left-wing populist, but I would categorize him as a fascist. I mean, his politics, just for the internment, it may seem unreasonable even to people on the left, but I would classify FDR as much more of an actual fascist than Trump. Trump's so far just been a dum-dum. He hasn't done anything. FDR, I can indict that motherfucker right now. Excuse my language.
Trump's done an awful lot, actually, in the short time he's been around. I don't know much about FDR. Maybe you're right, but I mean, if he was kicked out by the Supreme Court, even if it took the Supreme Court to do it, then he wasn't really much of a fascist. And internment camps, as much as it may be cruel, is not necessarily fascistic. I mean, wasn't there a war on?
Wasn't acceptable. He wasn't just I mean, this is just my political stance, but he did not just intern prisoners of war. He took civilians that were just the same race as the aggressors. You're English, like ethnically you're English, like Anglo.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So let's say, for example,
I know what you mean.
Okay, you're working as a foreign journalist in another country, and they go, "We're at war with the English." They grab you, they throw you in an internment camp, starve you, beat you, rape you. You understand my problem with that concept? Why, to me, that's effective fascism.
I mean, it's a pretty fascistic policy, but that doesn't mean he was a fascist in general. But I'm not sure why this came up really. Oh yeah,
okay,
the mechanism for fascism. Okay, so he didn't play the role of a fascist, even if he had one or two fascist policies, because he did leave when his term was over, even if not voluntarily. He did not start a fascist dictatorship in the US, even if he had a few policies that are fascistic.
I was actually wrong. FDR, they passed a term limit on him, but he died in the middle of his fourth term. I just Googled that. So he actually died before he left office. He was never taken out. And he tried to stack the Supreme Court in order to get his policy proposals across.
Okay, but all presidents do that, don't they?
No, he went beyond the legal number of Supreme Court justices that were constitutional. He had to be pushed back against that. Okay, I don't care if he was trying to achieve left-wing ends. In my opinion, the way that he used the apparatus of government was fascistic at the very least.
Okay, well, I mean, the U.S. government is very legalistic, and if something happens, then it's got to have gone through law to happen.
You would be surprised how long that window between something illegal happening and something getting bound up in its process up to the judiciary exists and can take in this country. How long things can take before they are declared unconstitutional in this country can be decades. And in the interim, the injustice is perpetuated and is relevant because it affects the lives of everyday people.
I mean, I don't know how it could get passed if it hasn't already gone through the system, but maybe it could. I don't know.
Okay, Trump passed his executive action, and it took quite some time to get it revoked.
But it didn't directly affect the system. Like, surely a president can't just affect the constitution of the government itself. I mean, surely he's beholden to the structure.
He can fire off an executive order until somebody says it's unconstitutional, and if he's got sympathetic Supreme Court justices, they'll say anything's constitutional, including segregation, slavery, Jim Crow. I'm just speaking from an American perspective. I'm not sure how the judiciary works in the UK.
Well, sympathetic judges doesn't mean that there's an impropriety necessarily.
In the case of Antonin Scalia or Clarence Thomas, there are several cases where their either endorsement or dissent traverses the boundaries of what mainstream legal interpretation of constitutionality would indicate. Okay,
that's fine.
And also, I mean, again, some justices during the FDR era as well justified and accepted violations of civil liberties that were later found to be unconstitutional.
Well, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were wrong in the first place. It just times change, but I mean, it's all interpreted anyway, so it has to be different. But I don't know. This doesn't seem.
I am concerned about Trump. I am concerned about his tendencies, but I have not seen him. Beyond saying it in a joking manner or in sort of a hyperbolic fashion, I can't say Trump's a fascist yet, but I am very concerned about his fascistic tendencies, and I can certainly say that there are a lot of indicators that he is a component of a kleptocratic administration.
Kleptocratic, that means thievery, doesn't it?
Yeah, like the Russian state or the like post Tiananmen Square Chinese Communist Party. We're talking about, young princes and stuff like that. That they're like
Oh,
certainly
not young lords, though.
no, young lords is that's
Yeah,
just
I
a
know.
political name.
I think
Yeah.
I don't think there's much evidence to support the idea that he's kleptomaniacal or anything like that, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, the privatization program of his appointees to various government institutions, including the drafting legislation to abolish those institutions completely, makes me very concerned that what's going to happen is the same thing that happened under Obama, under Clinton, under Bush and Reagan. Kleptocracy is not a new thing in the United States of America. It's just they're running out of things to steal. And my concern is after Trump, after they've stripped the tires off of the automobile of the United States, that then the fascists will come as they did in Greece after the mass kleptocracy and austerity and go, we've got bread and good feelings, and then you and I are both in trouble in the West if that's what comes after.
That's kind of interesting, actually. You've managed to build up a left-wing version of the narrative about globalism that has been part of the general conversation. In your opinion, it seems to me like you're sort of conflating right-wing libertarian with kleptocratic, to the point that you think that reducing the size of government is to ruin government, and that will bring about fascism.
As an anarchist, I'm in favor of reducing the level of government involvement in the personal
the
sphere.
benefit of capitalism.
No, because my concern is that, as a red and black socialist, is that if we're going to make government smaller, then the end point has to be to benefit the maximum number of people, preferably plebs, civilians. That's just a philosophical stance.
Okay, but do you think that giving people money is the most beneficial thing you can do for them?
Not if you give it to 10 people in a country of 300 million, no. Because trickle-down economics is...
I mean in general, including if you're giving it to everyone. So this
You're asking if I... Okay, please.
Well, I'm saying that, do you think it's best for a country, for the people in the country, to just have a set amount of money each, and that's basically the only way that the money flows? Or do you think it's better for them? Go on.
I'm sorry. I support a universal basic income.
Okay. Well, I mean, how high is that income? Because universal basic income could be used to mean communism, or it could be used to mean socialism.
I think that universal basic income should be adequate to provide a cushion and not a replacement for full-time labor. I think that if you consolidated all the social welfare programs in the United States into basically single-payer health care and a universal basic income, we would be able to shrink the size of government, tend to the budget, and not engage in sort of this ruthless austerity that undermines Keynesian economic job growth.
It would also reduce the effectiveness of capitalism and reduce the encouragement of people to start small businesses and to do better in jobs. And it would encourage more people not to have jobs at all. Don't get me wrong, I lean left generally on this stuff, but I also see the perspective of the right. And you can't ignore the issues of giving people stuff. It will hurt the economy.
I'm very concerned about the concept of exceptionalism because it can be very dangerous and metastasize. I'm willing to present universal basic income as a limited measure to replace basically unemployment insurance and Social Security benefits. I'm not implying that universal basic income should be some kind of free paycheck for people who want to go pursue a career as a professional artist or something like that.
All right. Well, it seems like you're not quite as far left as I thought. Then
I'm willing to have moderation points. Without I'm willing to have moderation points because obviously that is a shrinking of the government sphere. Social welfare is not an absolute good. Social welfare creates dependency on the government as an anarcho-communist or libertarian socialist, however you want to call it. I'm not interested in people just getting by on welfare. I would prefer that they have the option, if they fall in hard times, to go on welfare. But I prefer that people work, because work creates economic activity, and economies work from the bottom up. That's how economic activity works.
Well, this is just making you sound moderately left, but you've used ultra left on your profile.
Well, that's so debatable. I mean, there's some people that consider Huffington Post ultra left, and to me, they're center right. So for me, ultra left is something that you even disagree with Democrats, which is to say that you consider, for example, I've encountered a lot of controversy with the idea of calling FDR a fascistic leader. I've encountered a lot of people who think that because Milton Friedman supported universal basic income, that's a right-wing opinion, and my opinion doesn't necessarily, just because we agree tacitly doesn't mean that I wanted the entire program that Milton Friedman, as a libertarian capitalist, was advocating. But yeah, any one of us can be categorized as extremely left-wing or moderate based upon where we agree with people, right?
Well, it does seem like I mean, if we're talking left and right as an economic, then it seems like the fundamental aspect of that of economic left and right, you're just like moderately left on. But I mean,
hold on, very, very quickly. Sorry, excuse me. Anarcho-communism is not about the same social contract as authoritarian communism. It's not about creating sort of this Mao Zedong 1984 style of everybody wears the same clothes and all that stuff. In red and black anarchism, you work for your equality. Your personal agency is exercise, and that you work for your community. It's not, you don't sit home and take a check.
And if someone does,
we have to qualify whether or not that person needs to be exempt from work. If they need to be exempt from work for legitimate reasons, then they need to be exempt from work. If they can work, then within this form of more libertarian and anarchistic socialism, you got to work. You have to contribute. You can't just free ride. That's social democracy stuff about take a paycheck so that you can pursue your dreams. I'm not interested in that. That's a waste of everyone's time. And it leads.
Okay, but my question was, what if someone doesn't work?
If someone refuses to work, they are going to have to subsist on whatever they can then call together. But you don't. At least my understanding of a social contract within my own philosophical construct is not involved in just paying people to lay around. I mean, those people are not productive members of a society. They're just not. If you want, okay.
It's not really communism then, is it?
Communism involves work. Communism is about work. It's not about leisure. That's capitalism you're thinking about.
I think you have that backwards.
Let me qualify that. Capitalism can create a class of people who don't have to work for a living for generations at a time.
Yeah, a very small percentage of the population, as Bernie is quite wont to point out.
Okay, but the even within these brutal authoritarian communist regimes, people work. They work for meager sums of money.
But they work because they had a gun barrel pointed at their head because it's authoritarian. My question is, how do you implement that motivator without the gun barrel?
Anarchism, or in terms of anarchist communism, people who don't work don't eat. If they can't work, they get fed. If they don't work, they don't eat. And of course, that's not that meaning that can be extrapolated upon. You don't get to partake if you don't contribute, if you're capable of contributing. That's a basic anarchist collective principle. You can ask the ANCAPs about that too.
So what if someone does a job that's basically worthless?
What is? I'm not sure how a job can exist that's worthless. No one would pay for that.
Well, no one will pay for it in a capitalistic system. But, what if someone works, but the work is basically useless, either because the job itself is useless or because they're not working properly?
Within an anarcho-communist society, the job would no longer exist. It would cease to have utility. People wouldn't engage the need for that job. They wouldn't barter anything. There would be no reason for it to exist.
Well, not necessarily, but what I mean is, if the work that's being done is not worth the average, I mean, in your society, is there any disparity between the pay that people get if they work?
Oh, you're talking about like supply side versus.
No, I'm just talking if someone works as like an engineer or a doctor, do they get paid the same as someone who's like a sewage worker?
Each according to their talents and according to their needs. You understand?
Okay, but that's not communism.
I could have sworn that was in fact a communist statement.
But if they're being paid different amounts,
wasn't that Marx?
Maybe if they're being paid different amounts, then they're not equal. It's not really communism, is it? Have I misunderstood?
No, it's okay. Karl Marx, right? Each according to their talents, and then you work based on what you can do, and then you receive based upon what you need. So you don't receive more than you need. You don't need to pay a doctor $600,000 in a society where anybody can be trained as a doctor. You know what I mean? You end up anarcho-communism is a purely utilitarian worker state. So if your job has a utility, your job just won't exist because the only kind of jobs are based on utility. And then we can
that sounds like a strange interpretation of the phrase. It's from each according to his ability to each according to his need, right?
Yes, that's Karl Marx.
Okay, that doesn't sound to me like it would justify paying a doctor more. From each according to his ability means basically you take more from a doctor than you would from a someone that has a very badly paying job. Not necessarily so that he still ends up with more, and then to each according to their needs is just if someone needs more money, then they get more money.
Okay,
but like if someone has a worse paying job, then they get more money. I mean, that sounds like it's advocating for equality of outcome. It doesn't sound like it's advocating for what you're talking about.
Okay, I've had a discussion about equality of outcome before. My interpretation, and again, I'm not Marx, and I cannot speak for international anarcho-communism, but here's my interpretation as it relates to red and black socialism. Each according to their needs means that you have a doctor who is single, and he only needs a one-bedroom apartment, and he needs one car. And you have a plumber who has 4 children, and he has a wife, and he needs 2 cars. The plumber's job is of similar utility to the doctor in a very basic sense, but he does need to provide for more needs than that particular doctor. It's like an individualist thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's very individualist. But that doesn't sound like it's anything different. I mean, as someone in the chat just pointed out, I don't think you would even have money necessarily. You would just have state provisioned, not even possessions, but objects. So if someone has a family to feed, they would get sufficient objects necessary to, house their family and whatnot. But that's still, if someone is doing a less valuable job, a job that's less valuable to society, and they get more for doing it because they have a family, I mean, that if you take the family out of it, they're still getting an equal amount. All they're getting is what they need to live. So what's the motivation to take a job that's needed more in society? What's the motivation to excel? Also, how does this work without a state? Like, how is the property, not even property, how are the objects distributed without a state? He might have dropped again, chat. I wasn't expecting this to be a conversation about anarcho-communism itself, to be quite honest. Perhaps when he gets back, we'll we'll get onto talking about Kyrgyzstan, because I think that was something we were discussing on Twitter that might be fun to talk about. How's it going, chat? You enjoying it? I'm actually kind of concerned at how pro my side of the argument the chat is. I don't feel like I'm doing as well as you apparently think I'm doing. Libertarian Rhodes TM. Gabwa's not pleased with him. I can understand that, to be honest. It was about Antifa for a while, Popsicle Pete. But I mean, it kind of divulged, I guess. Giving you a headache. Well, congratulations for sitting through it regardless. You're right, I have been courteous. I have let him talk. Didn't absolutely have to, but it would have been silly not to, really. True, Antifa aren't well liked. My pink pimp. Yeah, if you have a wife, you get 2 cars, and the doctor only gets 1. I know, right? Gab was offering him a free helicopter ride. That's very good of you. I hear you. I hear like a sightseeing tour in a helicopter is reasonably expensive. So giving him a free one, I mean, it's not very capitalistic of you, but I can understand the sort of empathy angle of that. It's a very good thing to do for someone. I mean, it might open up their horizons, introduce them to new things, new experiences, you know. I don't know if it's over. I'm waiting for him to come back. Let's see if he's DM'd me on Twitter. Oh, God damn it, Twitter. TweetDeck takes a long time to load. There we go. No, he hasn't DM'd me on Twitter. I guess he'll be oh, for fuck's sake. The tweet announcing the live stream was in fucking Spanish again. Why? Wall. What is this? What is this big shit? Let's delete that. All right. Well, we'll wait for a few more minutes to see if he comes back. The people's helicopters. Did you know that if you throw enough communists out of helicopters, eventually it starts to pay for itself? Like the helicopter fuel and the labor of the helicopter pilot and the guy that does the pushing starts to pay for itself, because the less communists you have in your economic system, the more successful the economic system will be, the less sort of revolutionary attempts there'll be, the less just general radical leftist bullshit there's going to be. So your economy will get better because there are less communists in it. Or at least that's the theory. A tweet from Gabwa. Who is this commie in your stream, and how tight is his need to seize the means of production? It's a good question. Maybe I'll ask him when he comes back. Yeah. I guess while we're waiting, I hope he gets back. I think he will. I don't think he has the intent of just leaving. But yeah, I can tell you a little bit about what I was planning to talk about next. Was he sent a tweet that seemed to imply that shitlords are part of the alt-right. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Kekistan. Because he also sees Pepe as an inherently, or at least currently, white nationalist symbol, and therefore Kekistan as intrinsically associated with it. And so I showed him the anti-communist action, sort of rendition of the Antifa logo, but as a pro-communist, pro-capitalist throwing communists out of helicopters Pinochet thing, and said, doesn't this count as the same thing? I mean, Pepe's been appropriated by the alt-right. This is an appropriation of the Antifa logo by pro-capitalist meme lords. Sargon is a white naturalist. It's a fucking frog. Are these people retarded? It's more than just a frog. It's a message. Please debate AIU about Trump. AIU is too much of a pussy to debate anyone who he doesn't. I don't know how to phrase it, actually, because he probably does consider me weak, or at least publicly. But he would never debate me on I don't think on anything. I mean, he wouldn't debate Sargon and Trump. And he knows that Sargon and I have fairly similar opinions on the matter, so there's no way he'd debate me about it. I think he's just too weak, to be honest. I mean, I know that's sort of his game, but I think there's a reason it's his game. There's a reason he talks all this shit about being strong. It's called insecurity. And this is hardly news. Do you know what's going to happen? I'm going to end the stream in a minute when he doesn't come back. Then he'll come back, like seconds later. And we'll have to do a part 2. I guess we'll just give it a few more minutes. In Ancapistan, roads build themselves. I don't think Sargon cocked for shoe. I think he was conciliatory, and I think he didn't know the full details. Even like partway through the stream, I think there was something that he was told towards the end. But no, I think both Sargon and Harmful were quite decent and honest in that stream. And I mean, I'll say they're two of my favorite YouTubers, but I wasn't too bothered that they were arguing, because they both have a useful position to this discussion, I think. Harmful is very much like full individualism, where he doesn't want to be part of any group, and I can totally respect that. And Sargon is more of sort of put a bit of political realism in there, where he recognizes that you have to be part of a group to get something done, and he does want to get something done. And I sympathize with that too. Okay, he says that he can't muster up an adequate signal to launch Hangouts without the app crashing. Okay, that's nothing to do with signal. All right, I'll keep the chat entertained for a few more minutes. Right, I think he's just having tech difficulties. He says it's signal, and he might well be right, but I don't think the app will crash due to low signal. We shall find out. Whew, lad. I have to entertain you all now. I hope you understand the difficulty I'm going through here. I'm not a natural entertainer. Sing the national anthem of Kekistan. What's the tune? Oh no, I'm not even going to try it. I'm not a singer. Everyone hates Candid. I think Shu and Skeptic's still okay with it, but there might be any number of reasons for that. Bringing Kraut and T. I could probably get Jeff on, actually. Maybe Kraut. Right, I've asked Jeff if he maybe wants to come on, and some others. Metaco's Deviant series. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it, sorry to say. Paid to like Candid. Maybe. I don't think it's that simple, though. I honestly think that they probably do like Candid, and that was actually at the base of their problems. I mean, once you step in, maybe this is even the corporate tactic. Once you step in one toe into the pool, it's very difficult to. I mean, it doesn't quite work in the analogy, but you see what I mean. Once you've done one thing that's part of the deal, it becomes harder to justify pulling out entirely. All right, he says it's updating. The app is updating. Honestly, I'm not sure that'll fix the problem, but it's not impossible, I guess. Do I think TJ likes Candid? No, I think he's just a whore, which is fine. It's been a while since I've seen his advert, or maybe I didn't even watch it. But knowing TJ as I somewhat do. An ad for attack helicopters. What, you mean respect my pronouns? Brr and brr. It's the sound of the genitals, or in other words, the miniguns. Once you're sold, you have no moral ground. I see what Sargon is saying about people getting funding. I've had a few videos demonetized. It's not that bad for me. I'm sure it's worse for others, especially people who talk about sensitive subjects and don't just like pontificate on concepts like I do. For people that talk about ISIS in the news, that would definitely be more of an issue, because it basically just demonetizes your video if it's got ISIS in the title. But I mean, there's various little attacks on revenue streams of people like me. I don't think it's a particularly huge campaign, because these platforms could shut us down quite easily, and we wouldn't be able to do much about it. Like if Twitter just shut down all the anti-skeptic, or sorry, anti-SJW YouTubers' Twitter accounts, they wouldn't be able to do much about it. There'd be backlash, but I mean, there'd be no real action to take against it. So I don't think they actually want to. I think they are just being pressured, and they're trying to resist the pressure to a certain extent. My pronoun is, there are two genders. My pronouns are Your Highness and Your Majesty. You like TJ, but you recognize his flaws. Yeah, kind of. I haven't been watching DP for about a month or two now, which is the first time I've stopped watching it, really. Yeah, Christy Kelly says, I don't know how YouTube can justify demonetizing stuff on ISIS, even if it's within fair use and factual criticism. I suspect that the reason is not ideological. I take a less partisan perspective on why Twitter and YouTube and other social media platforms, not Facebook probably, but Twitter and YouTube, have these incentives or disincentives for people like us. I think it's less likely to be about ideology and more likely to be about economic and social influences. I mean, the reason that a lot of things might be prevented on Twitter is because of interest groups like parents. Probably why the sort of attitude against abuse on Twitter is quite heavy, because parents don't understand the internet and they want someone else to do the hard work for them. When is this commie shit coming back? Uzalu Wakang's King Uzalu. I'm not aware of Dino Corp, or Din Corp, sorry. I know of Din DNS, but I think that's different. DP's gotten really boring recently. People have been saying that for a long time. I think I just stopped watching it because I went off it. I don't know if it's anything to do with them really. Mr. Hitler says ISIS shit doesn't look good when you're trying to sell shit. I don't know if that matters, to be honest. I think people are able to compartmentalize the ad from the content of the video. And I mean, there's ads on all kinds of shit on YouTube that might be bad to associate with your product. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Paul, to be honest. And I had a sort of a personal experience with that ages ago, back when Josh went on to debate him on the AIU thing. Admittedly, Josh didn't do as well as he could have done, but Paul was a total dick. Very some dishonest rhetoric tactics being used. And since that happened, and since I was sort of on the other side of it, I started noticing that that's a pretty common occurrence with Paul. He's very uncharitable. I mean, the thing with Milo, I just thought, okay, Paul just did badly on that. I didn't really think too much about it, but that's the reason he did badly, because he was so fucking confident going in, and he was so uncharitable to his opponent right from the start. And this is why I say frequently that if you don't try to understand your opponent, you will lose to them every time. And that's what happened with Paul. I think DP are quite partisan as well. So, Josh didn't do great. Actually, I think I've said this publicly before, but it doesn't really matter now. It's been so long anyway. People wanted me to go on instead of him. Some people who I won't name, but who are influential and who were in that group, wanted me to go on instead of him. In fact, only one person wanted him to go on instead of me. And they still wanted me to have gone on after that had happened. But that's not an indictment against Josh. I think he did all right. He definitely could have done better, though. Yeah, Kraut was on DP once. I think that's actually part of the reason he got a big jump in subscribers, because he had an argument with TJ, and I think it would be fair to say he proved him wrong on something. Did Bering go too far with his Shives troll? What did he do beyond the initial troll? Because that was pretty genius, I have to say. I don't think he's done anything beyond that. If that's all he's done, then he certainly didn't go too far. I'd be tempted to encourage him to go further with it. Shives is definitely the kind of person that, whilst obviously you treat him as a fellow human, I don't have any respect for him beyond basic human respect. He's a contemptible person. And that's not a matter of like hatred or anything, it's just pity. It's just like, you are an evidently terrible human being for many different reasons. And I just pity you. You think Scotty's the best? He barely ever has anything useful to say. It's all just bluster. Any word? Still updating. All right, well, we'll wait for him to say. I love how Celtic Savior is advertising my stream now, even though there's fucking no one here to talk to. I'm just fucking around with the chat. Demotivator and Kevin Logan aren't that bad. Get out. Leave now. No, they're awful. I mean, okay, I haven't talked to Kevin very much. I talked to him a bit on Twitter, and he actually seems all right. I think Kevin's probably all right. But Tim is a total dick. Will Edgy come back to the internet? I don't know. I haven't been talking to him. Shives needs to get punched by Richard Spencer. Karma. I don't advocate violence, but that would be kind of funny. What are your feelings on moral relativism? If you mean like culturally relative morality, that's just postmodernist bullshit. If you mean recognizing that morality is subjective, that's a philosophical fact. So somewhere between those two is reality. They aren't as bad as Fisty, Splinters, and Shives. I haven't had as many run-ins with Fisty. I don't know if she's actually worse than Tim, actually. Maybe she is. But Shives probably is. I mean, just the notion that Shives would believe that bullshit that Bering made up. It's just amazing to me how deep in his echo chamber he must be to believe that. Steve Shives is a Nazi trolling the left. That'd be pretty funny. Beach is here. Hello, Beach. Yeah, it looks like you have missed it, but you're not supposed to have done. He's disconnected for some reason. Same warning, slow speed connection before Hangouts has stopped, error. Okay. Okay, so he's having manifold technical issues. All right, I've offered to postpone until later. Shives would be more tolerable if he was a Nazi. Yeah, probably. God damn, though, that wouldn't be a very good advertisement for the far right, would it? A Nazi who blocks everyone. Might make some for some good puns, though. Commie Wi-Fi. Yes. Anti-fags took the stream down, obviously. Well, you can't take the stream down. I'm still here. I think so, anyway. Wasn't planning on stopping just yet. See what he says. Honestly, like, as much as I appreciate the chat very heavily taking my side during this, I don't think I was very convincing. I don't think I quite got the point across. I think to someone who already believed what I did, it would have been convincing, but that's not really the point, is it? Yeah, Beach, this is one thing we can comfortably agree on, that political violence, which is not physically self-defensive, is not acceptable. Yeah, that's a good point, Mr. Hitler. I was going to make this point that, like, what do you guys think happens when you normalize political violence and then your opponents stop being so cordial? When your opponents stop being so polite and decent and reasonable, and they start actually retaliating, they start actually being self-defensive. I mean, you guys are fucked. Antifa are just a bunch of pussies, a bunch of rich kids who are just bored and who have this pathological need for what they delusively believe is compassion, which is actually just moral grandstanding to the point of violent outbursts of hatred. They don't lack tolerance for their own intolerance. They just don't tolerate what they perceive as intolerance in others. But because everything they see in the world is based on delusion, even the most tolerant people who are regardless right-wing are perceived as Nazis if you say the right things. I mean, I'm quite sure that if I talk to a good proportion of Antifa, especially the violent ones, and if I said, like, yeah, Trump's all right, he's not great, he's not a good candidate, but he's way better than Hillary was, and capitalism's great and all, they would probably call me a Nazi or something similar, or a fascist or whatever. And it's not difficult. It's just a bubble of delusion with swinging baseball bats around the edge, and nothing is safe from it except other bubbles of delusion with swinging baseball bats around the edges. No, Chrissy, that's actually you're getting the firefighters thing from what was shown to be a fake, don't take that seriously. And I did at the time. I tweeted it out because I thought it was funny, but it was shown later to be a fake. Yeah, they do despise liberals. You're right. Okay, well, turns out that my entertaining you for the last, what, half an hour hasn't really been very needed because he's apparently not going to come back on. So we're going to end it here then, I guess. But maybe I should start doing streams again where I just talk with chat and do some other casual stuff like I used to with the Bunkathon. It's been a while. I probably will get back to that at some point. Yeah, Lulz get the bullet too. It's fucking chillin' shit. Oh, really, Beach? It's interesting. I'd like to have a debate with him. He seems like the kind of guy I could really fuck with. Praise the sun. Okay, yeah, anyway. Thanks for coming, everyone. We will surely do something like this again, and I'll definitely continue the friendly chat series. It's quite enjoyable. Getting a lot of different perspectives here. Yeah, so thanks for coming. We'll do a part 2 if we can manage to arrange it. See you next time. Oh, video probably tomorrow. I might as well tell you what it's about. Dear white people,